He stayed through the lies, did the work, and watched her bring the man she cheated with back into her life. He caught his wife sexting a colleague. Right there, in front of him, like she wasn't even trying to hide it. And instead of walking away, he stayed. He chose her. He chose the marriage, the history, the 15 years they had built together, and he chose to believe that people could change. What he did not know yet was that while he was choosing her every single day, she had already stopped choosing him years before he ever found out. This is the kind of story that doesn't make you angry right away. It makes you sad first. Then it makes you furious. So let's start from the beginning. 15 years. That is a long time to be with someone. That is a long time to build a life, a routine, an identity as a couple. Think about what 15 years actually means in a person's life. It means shared apartments and maybe a shared home. It means learning each other's habits so thoroughly that you stop noticing them until they are gone. It means being each other's first phone call, the person in the passenger seat, the face across every dinner table, every holiday, every quiet Sunday. This man had been with his wife through all of it, through whatever hardships came their way, through the kind of seasons in a marriage that test whether two people are actually in it together or just coexisting under the same roof. And he had made his position clear from the very beginning. Cheating was the line. Not a line he drew in anger, not a threat he made in the middle of some argument about dishes or money, but the one thing he had always said, openly and honestly, would end the relationship for him. He was not issuing ultimatums. He was telling her who he was. He knew himself. He knew what he could and could not live with. And he told her that, clearly, early, without ambiguity. She knew exactly what that line was, and she crossed it anyway. Not once. Not twice. 3 times, with 3 different men, over the course of their marriage. The first time was only 3 years in. 3 years. They were barely out of the early stage of marriage, still in the window where most couples are still figuring out how to build a life together, still learning who each other actually is outside the honeymoon version of themselves, and she was already sleeping with someone else. That detail alone should sit with you for a moment, because it means that for 12 of the 15 years they were married, she was carrying that secret. 12 years of looking him in the eye across the breakfast table. 12 years of saying good night and good morning and I love you. 12 years of building something she knew, on some level, had been quietly rotting from underneath. And she only gave any of it up piece by piece, reluctantly, under pressure, when she had no other choice left. That conversation he describes, long and difficult, where she was very reluctant to reveal anything, that is not the conversation of someone who is remorseful. That is the conversation of someone who is calculating. Someone sitting across from a person who loves them, doing quiet math in their head, deciding how much they have to give up in order to preserve what they want to keep. She did not come to him with the full truth laid out. She parceled it out in the smallest possible increments. She made him drag every single detail out of her, one painful question at a time, and even then he had to ask the right questions in the right order to get the real number of people involved. You can imagine what that conversation felt like for him. Sitting there, hoping each answer is the last one, and then watching another door open behind it. That is not honesty. That is damage control wearing the mask of honesty. And here is the part that makes it so much worse. When she finally did open up, she gave him a reason. She said she was in a very tough place mentally when the first affair happened. And he heard that, and he is clearly a compassionate person, because he took it seriously. He sat with it. He thought about it carefully. He decided he could not hold her past mental state against her, because he understood that people in pain sometimes do things they would not otherwise do, and he did not want to be the kind of person who uses someone's lowest moment as a weapon. He extended her more grace in that moment than most people would have, more than she had any reason to expect. He chose to believe that what happened was a symptom of her pain, not a reflection of her character. And that compassion, that generosity, that deep willingness to see her as a full and complicated human being with her own struggles and wounds, that is exactly what she used to stay in the marriage while continuing to do exactly what she had always done. Because she did not stop. She kept sexting the same colleague. The same man. After the big conversation, after whatever tears were shed, after whatever promises were made and whatever fragile moment of apparent honesty they shared, she went right back to it. He would check her phone and find it again, and his stomach would drop again, and she would beg for forgiveness again and explain it away again, reaching for whatever framing sounded just plausible enough to keep him holding on. She cycled through every explanation a person in that position cycles through. It means nothing. It is just words. I cannot control it. I am working on it. And he kept holding on, because he was not holding on out of weakness. He was holding on because he was genuinely trying to save something he believed could still be saved, and he had not yet accepted that he was the only one doing the saving. Oh, and she had to keep working with this man remotely. Right. Of course she did. He asked her not to contact this person anymore. She said she would handle it. She looked at him, the man who had just forgiven her for years of lies, and she said she would handle it, and she also begged him not to reach out to the man himself, which meant she was already thinking about how to protect that connection before the conversation was even over. And what did she do with that? She brought him back onto another project. She manufactured a professional reason to stay in contact. She handed herself a built-in excuse, packaged neatly as a work necessity, and she looked her husband in the eye and let him believe she was honoring what he had asked of her. That is not a mistake you stumble into. You do not accidentally assign a specific colleague to a project you are managing. That is a deliberate act that takes planning, and it tells you exactly what she was prioritizing when her husband was not in the room. Now here is what makes this man's story particularly striking. While she was doing nothing, he was doing everything. He started therapy. He went on antidepressants to manage the depression and anxiety that her behavior had pushed him into. He acknowledged his own flaws openly, including financial issues he had caused her pain over in the past, and he made real changes to address them rather than just apologizing and moving on. He did not just say he wanted to be better. He got up every single day and became better, step by step, in real and measurable ways, while carrying the weight of a broken marriage, a shattered sense of trust, and the constant low-level paranoia of never knowing what was true. He held himself accountable for his part in their problems even while she was actively continuing to betray him. There is something almost unbearable about that image. A man in a therapist's office, working through his own failures with genuine honesty, while the person he is doing it for is across town making plans she has no intention of telling him about. And she promised. She promised she would do anything to keep him. She said all the right things in the right moments, with exactly enough emotion to sound sincere, and then she did none of them. No therapy. No real attempt to cut contact. No visible effort to rebuild the trust she had spent years eroding. Just words, carefully chosen and recycled, dusted off and reused every time she got caught, and then back to business as usual the moment the immediate pressure passed. She knew what he needed. He had told her directly and clearly. And she looked at what he needed and decided, over and over again, that it was not worth the discomfort it would cost her to actually provide it. That is the truth at the center of this story. Not that she made mistakes, because mistakes are things people make and then try to correct. Not that she had struggles, because everyone has struggles and most people do not use them as justification for years of deception. The truth is that she looked at this man who stayed when he had every reason to leave, who healed himself, who held himself accountable, who was willing to forgive her for things most people would not have blinked before walking away from, and she decided he was not worth the work it would actually take to change. She kept the marriage because the marriage was useful. It gave her stability and history and a life she did not want to lose the comfort of. She kept the colleague because he gave her something else, something she clearly wanted badly enough to risk everything for, repeatedly, over years. She wanted both. She arranged her life to have both. And for a long time, she did. He says they are compatible in so many ways, just not in this one. And I understand why he frames it like that. When you have spent 15 years with someone, when you have shared that much time and space and history with a person, you look for every way you can to soften the ending, because softening it is how you make sense of all the years you gave. You focus on what was real and good because that is how you honor what you built, even when what you built was built on ground that was never as solid as you thought. But I want to sit with what he actually means by that one incompatibility, because I do not think he is giving it its full weight. He wants monogamy. He wants a relationship where both people have agreed to be present, faithful, and honest. She wants the security and comfort of a marriage and the freedom to do whatever she wants outside of it when no one is watching. That is not a small difference of preference. That is not a communication gap or a love language mismatch. That is a fundamental disagreement about what a relationship actually is. There is no version of couples counseling that bridges that. You cannot meet in the middle on fidelity. Either you are in or you are not, and one person being in while the other is quietly not will always, eventually, destroy the person who was in. He says he is tired. He says he is hurt. He says he is finally done. And what strikes me about the way he writes that is how quiet it sounds. There is no explosion in it, no dramatic declaration, no rage that has finally boiled over into something he cannot take back. Just a man who has reached the end of a very long road and looked around and realized there is nothing left to fight for on her side of this. Because he already gave everything he had. He changed. He grew. He did the work. And he did it mostly alone, in a marriage where the other person was never going to meet him there, because she never intended to. He ends by saying, "Wish me luck." And that one little line absolutely floored me, because even now, standing at the edge of ending this marriage, he still sounds like someone just hoping things will be okay. Not for her. For himself. For the rest of his life, the part he is finally about to start building on his own terms, in the direction he chooses, without having to wonder what is on someone else's phone. Here is where I stand on this. This man deserved so much better than what he got. Not because he is perfect, he has already told you he is not, but because he showed up. He stayed when it would have been easier to leave. He changed when he could have spent all his energy blaming her and done nothing to improve himself. He gave her every opportunity to meet him where he was, and she used every single one of those opportunities to do the bare minimum required to keep him around while changing nothing about what she actually wanted to do. That is not a marriage. That is one person loving someone and another person leveraging that love as a resource. The fact that she brought that man back onto a work project while her husband was sitting in a therapist's office trying to save their marriage tells you everything you need to know about her priorities. She was not afraid of losing him. She was afraid of the inconvenience of losing him. The disruption. The paperwork. The having to reorganize a life that worked well for her. There is a massive difference between those two things, and it shows in every single choice she made and every single change she refused to make over the course of that year. He said he is done, and I believe him. And I am genuinely relieved for him. Because somewhere on the other side of this, when the hardest and loneliest part is over, he is going to find out what it actually feels like to be with someone who is in it. Where trust is not something you have to go looking for evidence of every morning before you can get out of bed. Where you do not have to become depressed and paranoid just to see reality clearly. He did the work. He became a better version of himself through one of the hardest experiences a person can go through. He deserves to take that version of himself somewhere it will actually be seen and valued. 10 years together, and she was texting him she loved him 2 days ago. He saw every word. She told him she loved the other man 2 days ago. 2 days. And then she looked her fiancé in the face at the dinner table, or wherever they were sitting when he finally picked up her phone, and acted like everything was fine. 10 years. An engagement. A child. And she was calling another man baby while planning their wedding. This one hit different the moment I read it. 10 years together. 10 years of building a life with someone, of assuming that the person sleeping next to you is yours and you are theirs. 10 years of shared grocery runs and inside jokes and learning someone's sleep schedule and the way they take their coffee and what their voice sounds like when they are sick. This man is 37 years old and he has spent more than a quarter of his entire life committed to this woman. He has a child with her. He was about to marry her. And the whole time, quietly, on a phone she kept just close enough to never let out of her sight, she was maintaining a relationship with another man that she had been confronted about before. Not a stranger. Not someone new. Someone he had already raised as a concern. Someone she had already been asked about. And she kept going. Let us talk about that detail for a moment, because it is easy to read past it and it should not be. He confronted her about this specific man years ago. That means at some point in the past, something felt off to him. Maybe she mentioned him too often, with a softness in her voice that was not quite right. Maybe her whole body shifted when this person's name came up, the way people do when they are trying very hard to appear casual. Maybe she started being more protective of her phone, or stayed up later than usual, or laughed a little too quickly when he was nearby. Whatever it was, he noticed, he said something, and she either denied it or minimized it enough that they moved past it. He probably wanted to believe her. After that many years with someone, you want to believe them. And then she went right back to it. That is not someone who got caught up in something and made a mistake. That is someone who understood that she had a risk of being discovered and decided the relationship with this other man was worth taking that risk anyway. The way he finally found out is worth paying attention to too. He was not conducting some elaborate investigation. He was not obsessively monitoring her. He grabbed her phone to change the music. He went to Google something. Normal couple behavior. The kind of thing that happens 50 times a day in any healthy relationship where two people share a space and a life and do not think twice about picking up each other's things. And every single time he did this, her eyes locked onto that phone. She needed it back. She reached for it. There was always a flicker of something behind her expression, a tension she could not fully hide, a readiness to intercept. She was always one step away from a panic. That kind of hypervigilance does not come from nowhere. She knew exactly what was on that phone. She knew that if he scrolled the wrong direction or opened the wrong app, everything would fall apart. And she had been living inside that quiet dread, possibly for years, while still choosing not to stop. He found the messages in the deleted folder. And here is what that means in practical terms. She was deleting them. She was going in after the conversations and cleaning up the evidence, deliberately and repeatedly, as part of what must have become a routine. That is not someone who was confused about what they were doing or who was caught up in an emotional spiral they did not understand. Deleting messages is a deliberate act. It takes a specific decision every single time. She looked at those messages, she thought about the fact that he might see them, and she removed them. She weighed the risk each time and chose to keep going anyway. She just did not realize that the trash folder keeps things for a while before wiping them completely. And that one small technical oversight, that one gap in her knowledge of how the software worked, is what unraveled 10 years of secrecy in a single evening. He asked her directly. She denied it first. That should be noted because it matters. Even confronted, even knowing he had the phone in his hand and that something had clearly already shifted, her first instinct was to lie. To look him in the eyes and say no. Only when he told her he already had proof did she shift her approach. And even then she minimized. 2 times, she said. Different occasions. Last year, she said. And that was it, she said. As if carefully framing it as a limited, contained event would make it more manageable for both of them. As if saying last year would make it feel further away than it actually was. She was still trying to control the narrative even while it was collapsing around her. And then he asked about the text she sent 2 days ago. Telling this man she loves him. Calling him baby. I want everyone to pause on that for a second. She sat in their home. with their child somewhere nearby. And she sent that message 2 days ago. She denied it meant anything. She sent the man a message saying she was done with him while her fiancé was standing right there watching her do it, and the man replied with a thumbs up, because he was with his wife on Mother's Day. His wife. So this man she had been seeing was also married. They were doing this to 2 different families simultaneously, 2 households full of people who had no idea, and when she finally ended it under the pressure of being caught, the response from his side was a single thumbs up. Like she had just cancelled a lunch reservation. Like the whole thing was a minor scheduling inconvenience. That is how much that relationship meant to him in that moment. And she was telling him she loved him 2 days ago. He mentions that she is about to change her number. She is blocking him on everything. She is willing to do all of these things now that she has been caught. And I understand why that might look like remorse. I understand why someone in his position would watch her take all of those steps and feel something shift inside his chest, feel the faint and aching possibility that maybe this could be repaired. But I want to say this clearly. Everything she is doing right now, she should have done the moment she had the first thought about this man. The blocking, the cutting off, the willingness to blow up that connection entirely, all of that was available to her at any point over the course of however long this was going on. She chose not to do it then. The choice was always on the table and she walked past it every single day. She is only doing it now because she was caught. He says he made the mistake of asking when, where, and why. And he calls them daggers to his heart, which is one of the most honest descriptions of that particular experience I have ever heard. Because those questions feel necessary in the moment. You need to understand what happened. You need the timeline to make sense of your own memories, to figure out which moments were real and which ones were performances. But every answer creates a new image that you cannot unsee. Every specific detail becomes a splinter that works its way in deeper over time rather than coming out. He knows that now. He is sitting alone somewhere with all of those details, all of those images, replaying moments from the past 10 years through a completely different lens, trying to figure out what to do with a life that looked entirely different 48 hours ago. He has a young child. He knows it. He says his child is still young and does not understand what is happening, and you can feel the full weight of that in how he writes it, feel him holding that reality in one hand while his own pain sits in the other. Because it means this decision is not just about him and her. Every path forward has someone else in it who did not choose any of this and cannot protect themselves from the consequences. A small person who just knows mom and dad and home and the particular shape their world has always had. That is the hardest part of this situation and he knows it, which is why he sounds so torn even when every instinct he has is pointing him toward the door. Here is my take on this. He said every inch of him is telling him to leave. I think he should listen to that. Not because relationships cannot survive infidelity, and not because people cannot change, but because of the specific facts of this situation. She hid this for an extended period of time. She lied to his face when confronted. She was still sending love messages to this man 2 days before she was caught. She had already been confronted about this specific person before and continued anyway. That is not a pattern of someone who made one terrible mistake in a moment of weakness. That is a pattern of sustained, deliberate deception by someone who understood exactly what she was doing and chose to do it anyway. The child complicates everything, and I do not want to minimize that. Co-parenting after a split is genuinely hard, and it changes the nature of how 2 people have to stay connected even when they do not want to be. But staying in a relationship to preserve the appearance of a family does not protect a child. Children absorb the tension and the distrust and the quiet devastation that lives inside a household where 2 people are holding themselves together out of obligation rather than love. He deserves to be somewhere he can actually be present and at peace. So does his child. 10 years is not lost. I know he feels like it is. But 10 years gave him a child, and experiences, and a version of himself that has survived something genuinely hard. What is actually over is the illusion that what they had was what he thought it was. And as painful as that is, being free of an illusion is not the same as losing something real. He is 37 years old. He has so much road ahead of him. And he deserves to walk it with someone who is not deleting messages every night before they put the phone down. Drop a comment below and tell me which story hit harder for you. And if you stayed all the way to the end, you already know what to do. Give it a like and subscribe. It genuinely helps more than you know.